Alright, so I threw you for a little loop there because other than the name of Salma Hayek's character in From Dusk Till Dawn, that opening had nothing to do with the movie we're talking about today. However, I don't really think there's ever a bad time to show a clip of Salma Hayek dance. Am I wrong? I didn't think so. You guys all appreciated it, so you're welcome. Anyways, listen, I could have played some White Zombie for that intro. After all, another alias for today's movie is La Sexorcista. If you remember, they had that awesome album that blew my mind back in the 90s, and some of you may be too young for that. Some of you know what I'm talking about, but anyway. On this episode of the Cadaver Lab, we're dipping our feet into the nunsploitation pool. We're not jumping in head first, because if we were, we'd be talking about one of the sleazy Italian nunsploitation films. Oh my gosh, like Beyond Convent Walls, The Sinful Nuns of St. Valentine, Story of a Cloistered Nun, or even my personal favorite, Jess Franco's The Demons. Oh no, ladies and gentlemen, we're not talking about those sleazy Italian nunsploitation movies. We're talking about a sleazy Mexican nunsploitation movie, of which there are really only two, Alucarda and this, Satanico Pandemonium from 1975. Let's get into it. Nunsploitation, a subgenre of exploitation cinema centered around Christian nuns, typically living in secluded convents filled to the brim with strict religious authority and punishment for all those who disobey. All the while they're dealing with repressed sexual desire, which often sends them spiraling into psychological breakdowns, hysteria, or outright madness. And I guess that's just the power of super horniness, apparently. The genre often includes sadistic clergy, eroticism, and blasphemy, intermingled with religious imagery. And some of my favorites, we could even get a healthy dose of the occult and witchcraft. See Love Letters of a Portuguese Nun, or don't see it. It's one of those movies that I absolutely love. But if I recommended it to like the wrong person, I think they would think that I'm a total perv, and we all know that's not me. Hypocrisy and corruption run rampant in these films. Many of them follow a brand new nun struggling to adapt to convent life for the first time. A lot of the time, this newly minted nun is there against her will, but this is not the case in Satanico Pandemonium. Sister Maria is devout, faithful, and genuinely kind. She wants nothing more than to live a pious life and bring happiness to those around her. She's known for her charity, her good works, and her ability to heal both humans and animals. All is fine and dandy until one day, while she's taking a stroll through the countryside, she's picking up some wildflowers, and she encounters some buck-naked dudes standing in the marsh. He offers Maria an apple, or as we in the know like to call it, a piece of forbidden fruit. Well, it freaks the hell out of Maria, and she hauls ass out of there. Unfortunately, that little encounter creates a real problem for her. Now, I don't know how good of a look Maria got at this guy's hog, but seeing him and potentially his hog, and being offered that fruit awakens something inside of her, something that she did not know existed, and something that she believes is diabolical and growing stronger by the day. It's obvious this mystery man is Lucifer himself, and he's not going to stop until he fully corrupts Sister Maria. Maria starts seeing things. She spots this man wandering around the convent, only for him to disappear moments later. The same thing happens with the apple. She's struggling, but she's still trying her best to maintain her duties and help the people around her. Before long, she realizes she can't control these lustful visions, and what tortures her most is the possibility that she might actually be enjoying them. So what does she do? The same thing any self-respecting nun does. She takes off her top, lets the girl's air out, wraps a thorny vine around her waist, and pulls it tight in an act of self-punishment. She hopes this pious little display of atonement will do the trick. But what kind of nunsploitation movie would this be if it actually worked? A short and boring one, that's what. Maria continues to be tempted not only by the other nuns professing their carnal love for her, but her desires and impulses she never expected to experience. This may not be the sleaziest nunsploitation film ever made, but it definitely goes to some dark and uncomfortable places. For instance, not only does Sister Maria begin to try to corrupt the other nuns in the convent, but she also attempts to seduce a young boy in a series of scenes so awkward, I can never watch this movie with anyone else in the room. At one point, she even sneaks into this kid's room while he's asleep, strips down, climbs into bed beside her, makes her move, and let's just, I guess we'll just say, tries a little bit of handy time, okay? Wow, it's bad. But when he rejects her advances, she completely snaps, stabbing him repeatedly and burning his house to the ground, killing him and his grandmother. That is horny, guys. That is just the definition of being horny. But to make matters worse, she then tries to cover up any evidence connecting her to the murders. Eventually, Maria flees the convent and finds herself hiding in a cave where she experiences one of the most dramatic crises of faith ever put to screen. She goes back and forth between what she knows is right and her growing anger towards God and the convent for driving her into this state. She envisions what the church will do to her as far as torture is concerned. She has quite a vivid imagination, by the way. But what an opportune time for Lucifer to show up and give her one last shot to give up her soul to him. Well, it worked. She renounces her faith entirely and gives herself over to the temptation of sin. And honestly, from there, things for at least a little while seem to be going pretty great for her. The order welcomes her back and even promotes her to Mother Superior. And all that's left now is to head back to the convent and throw a party. Where the nuns once survived on gruel, bread, and bland meals, they now indulge themselves completely. There's dancing, there's fruit, wine, and absolute debauchery. Most shocking of all, they abandon their old way of life and any inhibitions they once had, and it turns out nuns know how to party. Sounds like a happy ending, right? Well, maybe not. The ending is brutal but ambiguous. It leaves the audience to decide whether Sister Maria ultimately found freedom or complete damnation. One question though, and I'm not Catholic, but are nuns always mean as shit? I mean, this is not just Satanico Pandemonium. Most of these types of movies, there's just mean nuns, man. I don't know. But anyway, yeah, I'll tell you what though, Satanico Pandemonium exists somewhere between art house cinema and the grindhouse. Yeah, it's sleazy, it's transgressive, it's blasphemous, but it's also gorgeous and vibrant. It was directed by Gilberto Martínez Solares. He directed 162 films in his career. His first directing credit, according to IMDb, was for a film called The Mayor in 1939. He's been involved in every kind of genre, from comedies to action films, even those Santo wrestling movies. He was a veteran and a big part of the Spanish Golden Age of cinema. By the way, that was a time of during World War II where the Mexicans were stopping the importation of foreign films, and the government was very supportive of the film industry, and they're like, we're minding our own business. Why don't we make some sweet movies? He and his son, actually, Adolfo Martínez Solares, wrote the film, along with a man named Jorge Barragan, who was actually not very prolific in comparison to Solares, so I don't really know much about him. But anyways, so much of the credit for this movie, in my opinion, belongs to Jorge Stahl Jr., who's a cinematographer on this film. Alberto Ladrón de Guevara was a production and set designer, and together they made this film look absolutely gorgeous. From the locations to the shot compositions and interesting sets, the outdoor locations, and this movie takes place in what looks like a green mesa, even though it's closer to probably a subhuman type of climate. Yes, I went there. Gorgeous landscapes from Tepoztlan and Morelia, Mexico. I'm not even going to try to say that right. Sorry, guys. And we get plenty of wide shots where we can take it all in. It's really gorgeous, actually. The convent itself looks amazing. It brings an almost kind of gothic vibe to the movie. It looks like an old castle. I'll tell you what, though, my favorite thing about the look and feel of this movie is the absolutely popping colors. They're vibrant. It reminds me of earlier movies that used like such vibrant colors, and maybe not necessarily in the horror genre, but for instance, I don't know, something like, I don't know, maybe this will be a little bit weird, but it reminds me of a movie like Seven Brides for Seven Brothers.
Bless your beautiful hide.
Oh shit, how'd that get in there? Sorry, my apologies. Jeez. I mean, I guess it makes sense that it looks like that because Jorge Stahl had been making films during this era, and even though that was not a Mexican movie, I mean, he probably got a lot from there. I'm sure everybody learns from everybody else, and I'm sure that may have been part of why this movie ends up looking that amazing. Anyway, the cast was great. Obviously, Cecilia Pezet, who played Sister Maria, had a lot on her plate. Well, she did an amazing job in her transformation from an innocent, loving nun to the morally corrupt thing she ended up being. She did a lot of emotional pleading and had plenty of moments of mental breakdown. She played those both amazingly. Enrique Roca, who played Lucifer, absolutely looked the part. I mean, I don't know. Like I said, she may not have seen his hog and I didn't see his hog, but I have a sneaking suspicion that it was all right. He didn't really have a huge part outside of looking menacing, whether he was naked or wearing a wild-looking cape like Lord Farquaad or something. But we also had Clemencia Magana as Mother Superior, Clemencia Collin as Sister Clementia, Daniel Albertos as Marcelo, and Vilia Lupercio as Marcelo's grandmother. I mentioned this a little bit above, but this movie is often compared to Alucarda, directed by Jorge Lopez Moctezuma, and that's from 1977. In fact, they're the only Mexican nunsploitation films from this era, if I got my facts straight, but you know, they're really not the same. Alucarda was about a bad seed from the very beginning. She was like totally bad. She didn't want to be at the convent, and as such, she attempted to corrupt others right as she arrived. But Maria was kind, soft, and nurturing until she was brought to her breaking point. But at that point, she did some diabolical crap, man. Both are worth watching for sure, but just a warning that if you have an aversion to females constantly screaming, Alucarda might be a bit much. I think that the last thing they have in common is they both have Mondo Macabro releases. When we talk about a lot of the boutique labels like Severin, Vinegar Syndrome, Scream Factory, and some other ones, Arrow. I'm just kind of looking at some of the ones I got. But Mondo Macabro is underrated, I think. I have the Mondo Macabro release of this movie, although I can't seem to find the cover right now. It came out in 2020, I believe, and I have it packed somewhere, but it's not on display in my place. Anyways, as I'm sure you all know, Mondo Macabro has some wild titles. They usually do a pretty good job of adding interesting extras to their discs. This disc had an interview with Gilberto Martínez Solares. It was pretty great because he felt like this was so that, by the way, that's the director's son. But he felt like this was so blasphemous and vile that he vowed he would never make another movie with the same topic. I guess he was Catholic and doesn't really want to go to hell. It makes sense to me. I think that the last thing I'll bring up is that the final orgy type of scene in this movie not only was wild and a little shocking after going through a pretty serious film up to that point, but in that same interview, Solares mentioned that they brought in high-class sex workers, sometimes described as high-end prostitutes or call girls, as extras. They figured that in order to get a more authentic, uninhibited performance for that scene, that's the way they should go. It never seemed like Cecilia Pezet was uncomfortable being nude, but let's just say these women were flaunting it, and it made the absolute gluttony and debauchery of that last scene work perfectly. Now, this isn't as sleazy as your run-of-the-mill, there's that word again, Joe D'Amato film. But dang, for what it lacks in sleaze, now let's be clear, this only lacks in sleaze when you compare it to a Joe D'Amato film. But like I said, what it lacks in sleaze, it makes up for in look, feel, and intensity. And it's a pretty good movie. It's a lot more somber throughout the thing than a lot of the other silly nunsploitation films, but it's a really good watch, and there's a reason why Rob Zombie named one of his albums after it, and there's a reason why Robert Rodriguez put the character Satanico Pandemonium in his movie From Dusk Till Dawn. Anyway, I think that's all I have for this one. Thanks again for checking this video out. I really enjoy making these things, and I hope you enjoy watching them. Do me a favor, like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. But until next time, I'll catch you guys later.